Welcome to part 3 of the Nativity Kings tutorial, where we're going to be working on the camel's body. Now that we've finished all 3 of our king's robes, it's time to move on to the next step. And that step is going to be to fill in the body of the camel. And we're going to be using satin stitch, which we can see right here. We're going to be using 3 strands of 840. Now the trick here is that we're going to take our stitches and we're going to kind of rotate them in some different directions as we work through our camel. So let's start here in the middle of the neck, and these stitches along the neck, they're gonna go like this, straight across the neck. Then as we get up here into the head, we're gonna rotate our stitches so then across the nose here they go this direction, and then we'll come back down and we'll do the reverse or opposite down through the bottom. We'll rotate our stitches so that they then become vertical to fill in the space for the rest of the camel across. So to start here, I might need a better line right there. Hold that thought. One of the keys to making satin stitch as clean and straight looking as possible is to have good lines. So you can see, or hopefully can see right here on my line, it's a little light. The pen didn't make a super dark line right there, which means that as I make my stitches, I could get just a little bit confused as to where that needle needs to go. So I'm gonna just take a second and make this line be more solid first, so that I have a better idea of where I need to stitch every single time. So now that I have a good line, we're going to start satin stitch. And when I come over the head, when I do the head, I'm going to want to be coming up on this top side. So to start, I'm going to come up over on this line and go down on that other side. So I'm going to come up over here, and I'm going to think about staying right on the line. Tends to be my favorite choice when satin stitch. You could also think about trying to go right outside the line and covering it with your thread. Whatever you do, you just want to be consistent. The more consistent you can be, I'm going to use my thread here to help me see where I need to go, the better this satin stitch will look. So I'm going to go down right here. Now I'm going to be really detail oriented this first couple stitches. It may be a little bit difficult to see, but where I went down, once I pulled the thread to the side to then come up over here, it's feeling like my stitch is just inside this line instead of on it. So I'm going to back up just a little bit and retry this stitch, because I really want this first stitch to be set up where I want it, and then the rest of the stitches I can follow this first stitch as a guide. Now, I will admit I am being extra detail oriented because that's how I roll. If a little bit of variance in your stitch and your line is not going to bug you, you do not need to be as detailed as I am. Do what feels best for you. Just remember that you have a choice. You get to pick. And if being super crazy detailed stresses you out, don't do that. Stitching should be fun, and the beauty of a hand-stitched object is that it is going to fluctuate with every little stitch. So it's never going to be absolutely perfect, and that's why we love it usually, or at least why I love it. All right, so if you're unfamiliar with satin stitch, you can see that every time I'm coming up on this right-hand side and I'm going down on the left-hand side. And I do this so that my stitches can stay nice and close together. When we're only using 3 strands of floss, if I were to try and alternate sides to save floss on the back of the hoop, my stitches would end up being too far apart. So you get a much better end result if we take the time to fix our knot. We get a much better result if we take the time to come up on the same side every time and down on the opposite side. I am going to make a few more stitches here, and then we're going to start angling our stitches. And as I start to do that, I will jump back in and tell you what I am doing. Right about here is where I'm going to start to angle my stitches, because if I keep following this line all the way up to here, then I have a really big arc that I've got to accommodate in a really small space from one single point right here. So to help compensate for that, I'm going to try and get my angle of stitches to be pretty much straight from under right here to the ear at this point. So then from here, it's a shorter distance to rotate. So these first stitches, we're going to try and not change the angle of stitching too much, but help get set up for our big shift here in a minute. So I'm going to come up where I normally would, because this side, both sides have to look solid. So I can't take a gigantic step up on this side, or I'd have an empty space on the right side of our camel here. So I took normal stitch here, and then instead of going down where I normally would, just straight across right here, I'm going to kind of hug my needle in to where this previous stitch is and kind of slide down, in, and under a little bit. Then I come up, again, same distance here on the right side, and I'm going to go where I would have gone the stitch before on this side. And you can see now that my stitch is a slightly different angle than it was before. Now I'm going to make just a normal straight stitch across for my next one. And then I'm going to repeat what we did. So I'm going to go up, normal distance on the right, down, even more underneath this time. Putting my needle solidly underneath. It's not right here on the black line. It's inside a little bit, so there's not a lot of competition for needle space here on the edge. Go down into the fabric there, and then come up on the right, and then go all the way to the side. I'm going to repeat this at least once more. Straight stitch, and then the overlapping stitches. Now, from this point on, up until I at least get to the ear, I'm not going to do any straight stitches in between. I'm going to do the angle stitch. I guess I should say no extra straight stitches before. So I'm going to do a stitch that goes under, and then I'm going to go and do the stitch that goes all the way across. And I'm keeping all of my needle points along the line on this side pretty much as close together as I can get them. And then I'll repeat this time, instead of just doing a straight stitch across, I'm going to repeat the go under stitch. Now, as we're pulling our satin stitches through, we want to make sure to use a gentle hand, because if I pull satin stitch too tight, it'll start to pucker and pull in the sides of the shape. So we're just pulling until our floss lies nice and flat on the fabric. So that one I went all the way across, getting a little closer to the ear, and so I'm going to start changing my angle a little bit more. So I'm going to come a little farther away from the edge, go down in the fabric here, come up on the side again. Too far, come on, there we go. Then I'm gonna come down under that same main stitches here. This was my last down point. I'm coming farther over right here this time. And then this third stitch, I'm going to take all the way across to this opposite edge. This also looks like the last stitch I'm going to be able to do with my floss on my needle. So I'm going to anchor off and switch thread, and we will keep rotating our way around our camel's head. Okay, I changed my thread and I added a couple more stitches just to get me started here. And now from this point, clear over here until I end with kind of straight up and down, a little more this way, stitches to fill in the rest of our camel's head. We're going to be angling all of our stitches. So that means once every 5-ish stitches, I'm gonna bring a stitch all the way back down here. But for the most part, I'm going to be overlapping my stitches, because if I try and bring all of these stitches into this one point right here, it will not work. It will not end well. So we're just gonna continue on our merry little way. My last stitch ended right here. A little shine on that so you can see. Right here. And so I'm gonna fill in just a short stitch right here. And note that we're gonna go around the ear. We will come back and fill in the ear with satin stitch going this direction after we work through the head. So we're just gonna keep going through the head here. So I made a short stitch, and I'm just gonna bring my next one up into here. And I'm trying to make sure that my stitches stay straight. Sometimes as you pull your stitches around, well, as you pull your stitches down, it'll start to look like they're going around something, which we don't want. I want these stitches to look straight as possible. So this one, I'm gonna bring almost all the way to the edge. You can see there's a little bit of space. I'm not quite on the line. So that's gonna leave on the line available for another stitch or two away. Oh, I caught a tail. There we go. And then I'm gonna add a short stitch. And these shorter stitches, I'm making sure that they go under the previous stitches. We want the ends to disappear into the previous. So you can see this one's kind of feeling a little rounded off, angled to the side. So I'm gonna make like a more of a straight line right here by, again, going under. And then I'm gonna blend all of this together by going here. And this one I'm gonna take all the way down here to the line, because it's been a bunch of stitches since I came all the way to the line. And then you can see that these stitches just start to blend together. So I don't have any bulk built up right here, but I have a lot more needle points on this side than I do on this side. I do think I split one strand though a stitch or two ago, so I might go fix that. Otherwise, I'm gonna keep stitching. And then as I get right here past the ear, I will make full stitches from here down. And I'm just gonna go all the way around. I'm gonna leave a little triangle right here that I'll fill in when I come back for the ear. So just keep checking as you get close to the end of the ear here, to make sure that you jump up to this top line when is the right time. I've made it around around the head, and I'm now to where I'm going to use straight lines the rest of the way through. I've pulled things in, and you can see that I only have a few stitches down here. Most of my stitches are hidden underneath their friends, and now I'm just going to follow this straight line all the way out through the tip of his nose, and then I will come back and fill in this little triangle, and then do straight stitches from the tip of the ear back into the head before I move on back down to his neck. I finished the nose, and then I came back and I filled in these little stitches. And you just want to make sure as you fill in these little triangle right here that you angle those stitches as much as you can in towards the chin, if you will, here, neck. However, they're really small stitches, so do your best, but don't stress too much about it because you're not going to be able to tell all that much. Next, we're going to fill in this ear real quick while our thread is here. So we're going to come up at the tip of the ear. We're going to go straight down the center. Now we do this so that we have a guideline here in the middle of our ear. You can always test and check before you put the needle in. We have a guideline so that we know where our next stitches need to look like. So I'm going to work the top half next. All right, that fills in the ear. Now I'm going to jump back down to the neck, and I'm going to work stitches down and into the body. However, I'm going to change what side of the neck I come up on. As we worked up, I came up on the right hand side because I needed to be coming up on the outside of this curve so that I could hide stitches into the inside. So now as I work down, I'm going to cross over and I'm going to come up on the left hand side so that I can be on the outside of this curve as I curve down into the camel's body. So I'm going to be coming up on the left, stitching over to the right, and I'm going to fill in probably about this much with just straight stitches that are parallel to each other, and then I'll start to curve things around. And I've added some more heading down the neck, and about here I'm going to start adding a couple hidden under stitches, not too many. So by about here I'm hoping to be around this angle or so. So it's not a super quick change, but I'm going to start adding in some under those, so then by the time we get down in this curve, I'm kind of already pointing at it instead of coming all the way down in here and then having to rotate. It's kind of a gentle curve right here on the top of the neck and a big curve on the bottom, so we want to mimic that on both sides. Okay, from here on out, I'm just going to aggressively turn this corner so that by right about here, I'm going straight up and down. So do what you gotta do to make it around this corner. You're gonna do great. And here we have our almost completely finished camel. One thing I want you to be watching for as you finish through the camel is that you have one big long stitch that runs all the way down the side of this blanket all the way to the bottom, and the same on this side. And my lane's got a little wonky, probably because children touch all of the things in my house. So this line actually ended up covering this a little bit, just so I could finish with stitches that feel square, because how this looks right now is how it's going to look when it's done. So I opted to make stitches that look square rather than following a little bit of the wonky line and making some funky things happen over here. So if your lines have shifted a little bit, don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong. Just make sure you've got one straight long stitch on the side of each side of the blanket here, and that will help your finished product. Otherwise, we're just going to work down through around everything here. So you may have I have a couple little stitches underneath, like the top of this gift here, and there's a couple right here. So you will have some funky little stitches to finish filling in. The last thing we're gonna do for the camel is we're gonna take a single strand of floss, which you can just pull out from its friends. We're not gonna need a whole lot, so this nice little short piece I have is gonna be great. And we're going to add kind of a line of distinction, if you will, between the ear and the rest of the head. And this is a subtle thing, but what it's going to do for us is going to help cover up any funny little mistakes that we made while stitching and kind of solidify the head as a full solid shape. So I'm going to start right here. We're only going to stitch where the ear is overlapping the head. So I'm going to start at this point over here, and I'm just going to make a little row of back stitch right along the seam. So I'm putting my needle down right where the two pieces meet. You make a straight stitch, then you're going to come up to the side, kind of that same distance along. I know it's going to be a little difficult to see on screen. Just checking for knots, and then you're going to go back to the end of that previous stitch and go down, and then we repeat by coming up a stitch length away, making sure I'm using nice little stitches here to get around this curved part, and go down at the previous stitch, and I'll just continue my way all the way around this ear, making nice little stitches, filling in this gap. And there we have it. We've stitched around the ear. Let me bring my sample in here because my hoop and camera are stationary, and we'll look at this one real quick. Focus, there we go. So you can see the little stitches go just right around the ear, and they're a nice subtle hint, out of focus again, that will help us just make the camel fill all finished. So next I'm going to recenter my camera so we can work on these gifts down here, so you aren't having to look at the bottom of your screen, and we will continue working on our hoop.